Good day everyone. I am Victor, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Change is Inevitable, Employee Acceptance is Not, Managing the Impact of Organizational Change on Employees. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Dr. Maury Ann Metzger. Dr. Maury Ann Metzger has over 20 years of experience as a consultant, trainer, and psychologist. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Dr. Maury.
Thank you very much, Victor. Well, welcome everyone. I hope your day is going well so far. Thank you for joining us. As Victor said, our topic today is change is inevitable, but employee acceptance is not. Managing the impact of organizational change on employees. My name is Dr. Maury Ann Metzger, and as Victor mentioned, I have over 20 years of experience as a trainer, consultant, manager, and psychologist. So here's the things that we'll be covering in today's webinar. First, why change initiatives fail. Next, how change impacts people in the organization. Then what causes people to resist change? And then 5 powerful strategies for decreasing resistance and increasing engagement. And finally, how to create an ongoing culture of change. The definition of organizational change that I use is the altering of structures, strategies, procedures, roles, or cultures in an organization. So first, let's talk about why change initiatives fail or falter in organizations. 70% of change initiatives fail. That figure has been disputed depending on how you measure success or outcomes. Change initiatives are up against a few things, like organizational culture, history, both individual and organizational, and the status quo. But one of the leading reasons why change initiatives typically fail or falter is resistance to change, which is a human or people factor. There are other factors that influence whether a change initiative succeeds or struggles. One is that people often don't understand or believe in the change. 1/3 of employees don't know or don't understand why the change is happening, and only 4 out of 10 employees believe the changes will have the desired effect. So there's that lack of trust there. Other reasons that change fails or falters is that change events create uncertainty, instability, and stress. It's important to understand the impacts and consequences of change on people. First of all, people in charge of change often underestimate or fail to realize the impact that change has on employees. They don't realize that change, especially repeated or prolonged change, has adverse effects on people's mental and physical health. People involved in change experience a decline in security, coping, and motivation. All of these consequences matter as they cost people their mental and physical health, and for some people, it even costs them their jobs. And they also cost the organization time, money, and employees. So the organization itself also incurs consequences from change. Change also lowers morale in the organization. Companies also see an increase in absences, mistakes, and accidents during change. So next we'll talk about what causes people to resist change. And we first need to understand why people resist change before we can address how to deal with resistance. Change can be a threat to our psychological and physiological safety. Change can also trigger a sense of loss for people. Resistance also comes from not having a choice. People resist when they don't have a say in things. Low trust in leadership or the change process, and poor communication about the process. We're going to talk about 5 important strategies that can help minimize resistance and increase engagement. They are people first, normalize resistance, communication, engagement, and empowerment. Successful change initiatives prioritize people. They put people first. It's important to see employees as people first rather than as employees first. Likewise, when conducting change initiatives, it's important to keep people first and foremost in the planning and implementation process. Leaders and change drivers need to prepare people for change and not just prepare for the logistics of the change, and treat people with compassion. We cannot change anything until we accept it. You can condemn resistance, which is what typically happens in organizations, but that only leads to people digging their heels in more and intensifying the resistance. So when planning and implementing change, it will be important to view resistance as a normal, emotional human response to the change. It's also important to differentiate between voice and resistance when it comes to change. Stages of change. Another powerful strategy that we'll talk about for minimizing resistance is communication. Communication is a critical part of the change process. They also help to create psychological safety. Change initiatives need to have a formal and comprehensive communication plan and process. Communication also needs to be consistent. And finally, continuous communication is important. The next powerful strategy for decreasing resistance and increasing engagement is engaging people in the change. Change is more effective when you engage employees in the change. Engaging people early on and throughout the change process helps to decrease resistance and move people from just compliance to actual engagement. So who all should be involved in the change effort? One of the most effective ways to engage employees in the change process is to seek out and include their voices. People want to be heard. Finally, just a reminder that people's voices, their opinions, questions, and even challenges aren't necessarily resistance. Another way to decrease resistance and help people to accept and adapt to change is to empower people. Empowerment is about setting people up for success to navigate and adapt to the changes, the new ways of doing business. People need autonomy over their new role, position, or tasks. In addition to autonomy, people need support. Another way to empower people is to make sure they have the necessary resources. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Next, we'll talk about creating a culture of change. Organizations also need to realize that change impacts people's mental and physical health. They need to understand that employees are human beings first and foremost. Organizations need to accept that resistance is a normal human response to fear, anxiety, and loss. It's a form of coping. So next, we'll talk about some ways to help normalize change in an organization. First, people need to learn about change, its impacts, and how to cope and adapt. To do this, organizations can provide ongoing training about change for everyone in the organization. Next, making change resources and supports part of your orientation and onboarding materials for new employees by using the 5 key strategies we talked about when implementing change. Another strategy for normalizing change is to build change questions into the interview process. Lastly, you can recognize and reward people as they embrace new ways of doing things. So in summary, many change initiatives fail or falter. One of the leading factors for failure is resistance by employees. However, resistance is human nature, a natural response to change. To decrease resistance and increase engagement in change, organizations need to prioritize people, normalize resistance, communicate effectively, engage and empower people, and ideally, they create an ongoing culture of change. Change is complex and challenging. It's very complex and challenging. And I hope that you were able to gain some insights and some strategies to bring back to your organization. And there was a lot of information shared today, and I encourage you to just apply whatever information and strategies you can to your situation and your organization that can just help move the needle. Okay, yeah, well, just exactly what I had said before. I recognize I've been involved with many change initiatives, some that have went well, some that haven't, and it is a complex, challenging effort in organizations, but I do hope some of these strategies absolutely can help make the difference. So I hope you're able to implement some of them, and I wish you the very best in your efforts. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Dr. Mori. That does conclude the session for today, and thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day.
Thank you, Victor.